So, the Global Fight League was supposed to shake up the world of MMA. But now we get this article from Yahoo Sports by Shaheen Al-Shatti of Uncrowned that its debut event, headlined by Tony Ferguson vs Dylan Dennis, has been cancelled. I quote, GFL founder Darren Owen told Uncrowned on Wednesday that my investor didn't fulfill his April obligation. Owen said he believes the promotion will be able to work through it and that he doesn't foresee the events taking place in California, but will absolutely keep pushing forward. Owen said the target dates of June 15th to 16th are now being discussed. The notable announced matchups on the two cards included a trilogy bout between former UFC champion Renan Barão and UFC Hall of Famer Uriah Faber, the revival of the rivalry between former WEC/UFC champs Benson Henderson and Anthony Pettis, a meeting between former UFC champ Holly Holm and former Bellator champ Julia Budd, as well as Dylan Dennis facing UFC legend Tony Ferguson. And this had everyone. Alexander Gustafsson was supposed to be fighting Tyron Woodley, Shogun Rua, Fabricio Werdum, Frank Mir, Todd Duffy. Every fighter with a name that's outside the UFC or PFL was signed to GFL. But already, I spot a name, Alexei Olenek. He had just been knocked out a few weeks ago at BKFC. So are these guys really signed? This was an ambitious promotion, and I know people joke, Grandpa Fight League, Geriatric Fight League, but they haven't even had a single event yet, and they're the most talked about promotion outside the UFC. And you know you can call people stupid for thinking they could even put on an event, but Affliction put on a few events, headlining with Fedor Emelianenko versus Tim Sylvia, and I remember Tim got paid like $800,000, his manager said. People have also called out for a fight league for older fighters, so we aren't seeing Tony Ferguson versus Paddy Pimblett, a guy who's been in the UFC for a decade, having all these wars versus a guy who just came in a few years ago and is fresh. They promised a 50-50 revenue share with the fighters and some sort of retirement fund. And we're already seeing sort of a red flag, as fight promoters aren't notoriously giving, especially a promotion which hasn't even put on an event yet. It had its draft back in January, featuring 6 global teams of 120 fighters. GFL founder planning to fill the NFL void, as he said it. We saw this with International Fight League back in the day. You had the MMA team like Toronto Dragons, headed by some MMA veteran like Carlos Newton. It didn't work out, but it was a gimmick to try out, and GFL seems to be inspired by that. So let's look who's behind it. Darren Owen. Looking at his LinkedIn, he's been the founder and acting commissioner of GFL since 2021, so 4 years now, which is interesting because we only heard about it since about December, so this has been a 4-year process. There's a 4-year gap between his last job, which is the CEO of PFL. So before Don Davis, who we all know and love, this guy was the CEO from 2015 to 2017. That makes you start to think he's legit, as a lot of people are suggesting this is no good, that this is some sort of fraud. And before then, from 2013 to 2015, he was the founder and CEO of World Series of Fighting. So here's the thing, before he was PFL, it was World Series of Fighting. So he's actually the founder of PFL and has been the CEO of basically the same company from 2013 to 2017. And before that, he was the founder and CEO of Aggression Fighting Championship from 2006 to 2013. Which, searching this up, World Series of Fighting was called Aggression Fighting Championship beforehand. So it's been through 3 name changes. So for about 11 years he founded his promotion and ran it, going through several name changes, as we already said, and his education was at the University of British Columbia. Looking at the events of Aggression Fighting Championship, they seem to be mainly in Canada, so this is a Canadian fight league I think, and it had Jesse Taylor. You guys might remember him from Tough, the big muscled up guy who raged out at a bar and got kicked off by Dana White. And looking at GFL's LinkedIn page itself, it says there's people working at production coordinator at International Fight League, even someone who works as business development at American Fight League, with a lot of the accounts seeming to be anonymous. And there's about 4 who seem to be on this company's page but say they work at International Fight League, with one more saying they work at American Fight League, which I don't know what this means. Is this the International Fight League's page that they took over, or did the employees work there and now work at GFL but forgot to change where they're working? It is interesting the IFL had the same team format, wanted to bring NFL into MMA, then the GFL comes in with the same ideas. Someone can answer in the comments if this seems sort of fishy, But for a guy with so much experience in MMA promotion, it seems like he overpromised without the infrastructure to deliver, right? Because we look back at the Yahoo article, my main investor didn't deliver in April. Whoever this investor is, did they start seeing something isn't right there? Maybe there was legal issues. Then he said in January he wanted to pin a broadcast rights deal before April. So here we are, over a week away from Dylan Dennis versus Tony Ferguson, and we haven't heard a thing about their rights deal being done. And we wonder what happens to the fighters who thought this was all going ahead. They're all deep into their camps. Alexander Gustafsson left the UFC contract for the GFL. We know camps are expensive, so we need to think of them here. And I also wonder about the investors, because we know PFL is burning money, we know One is burning money. Are the capitalists going to start saying it's impossible to invest in a UFC competitor, as we're talking hundreds of millions gone in these upstarts? We may be stuck with a UFC hegemon forever, and that's not really what you want. You want competition to get the UFC working overtime, to keep the fans tuned in. You want the fighters to be able to say, if they don't pay me, this promotion will pay me. It's only good for everyone else, so this is a worry. But was it doomed from the start? Seems like it. It seemed like it was them trying to whip up hype to get investor money. We had the draft promotion video that was clearly AI, signing every single named fighter they can, and then likely offering bigger contracts that can actually be paid. I'll be honest, I was expecting at least one event, and I was looking forward to Tony Ferguson vs Dylan Dennis. That seemed like it was going to be fun to watch. Maybe Benson Henderson versus Anthony Pettis as well. But I asked the comments, do you think this is just over before it even really started? Anyway, these are my thoughts. I'll keep up to date with this and see if anything else comes out. I'm out.